You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, I'm going to hack and cough my way through another show today. How you feeling today, Josh?
Not too bad.
Well, fine. Anyway,
Sorry.
I've been struggling for about 2 weeks, Robin, just kind of now getting out of it. I was talking to some of B&I friends this morning because I wanted to get out. I could keep just lying around the house. And they say it's just going around a bunch. And I talked to other people, and they said, well, I had it, or I know people that do, and blah, 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 blah. So today we're going to talk about why ain't our kids learning anything? Or, that's an age-old question. And I'm not going to get into this. Well, back in my day, by God, we, memorized the chemical element table and all this other stuff, because the issues that we faced in 1978 or 9 in my high school years, we face now, but just I think at a much more accelerated rate. So if you see me snorting snot, and grab my nose like that, just to pardon me, I'm here for you, even on my deathbed. That's what I do for this community. How's that sound?
I'm here for it.
Yeah, you're pretty corny. Yeah, well, what can I say? Well, I might bring you into this. You had unique educational experience, mostly private schools, homeschooling, such as that, right?
That's correct.
And that story is much more common now than it was, say, even 20 years ago. And so I think some of that has to do with what we're talking about now. Why are so many parents opting for alternative formats and things of that nature? And, what the state of Texas response is all. And also I'm going to look at this study done by UC San Diego, which is one of your highest ranked public universities. I mean, we can say whatever we want about California, and I've said plenty, but they have a very fine academic collegiate system. Now, their high school system stinks, but as far as their college system, the Cal system is very, very good. And then they have other quality private schools there. So we're going to look at that and say, what in the world is going on? How are we pushing these guys through? How are we promoting it? And all the other stuff. But before we get into all that, let's talk about the sponsors who I know had quality educations by talking to the kind of people that they are. Our Place, of course. I went to Our Place, too, for the first time this morning. After a B&I meeting, I went over I was going to go do my prep work, whatever, and I said, well, I'd rather not go do it in a dark, dank studio. I'd rather go do it at Our Place, too. And I went and had some coffee and some biscuits and gravy, and I'm good to go. I'm stoked up, buddy. All right, so it's a good place to go. Also, it's a good place with that and with Gina's both to give gift cards. It's that time of year, and that's a good gift card to have is from those two establishments because, it'll get used, it'll be appreciated, and they'll enjoy the experience. So go by, and if you're not getting a pizza that particular day, get a gift card, stocking stuffers, that kind of thing. Give it to your favorite podcast host. I don't know. That'd be great. Anyway, also, thank you to John Williams. Saw him today. Old Pro Roofing, 817-734-2756. He was telling us about a horror story he had earlier, one of his inspections. This couple have been putting it off for a long, long time, and they have all sorts of damage now, and the insurance company's giving them all sorts of problems because they didn't report it soon enough. So have John come by and check your roof out. Again, 817-734-2756, so you won't be caught in the grim death grip of the insurance company. You like that? Yeah, I like it. All right, anyway. Also, I saw my friend Jeff there with the Withington Agency, Jeff Kelly, 817-781-0546. He talked about a particular house. It was actually a very good bargain. It's over by BHS, and it was like a 2-bath, 3-bedroom for about $310, and that's pretty good in Burleson. So if you're looking to move in and around the area, you might want to check that out. Plus, there's a lot of good bargains out there in a sense. A lot of the sellers are offering some incentives to buy their home and whatnot, and Jeff will help you navigate through that. So again, 817-781-0546 or at jeffkellyrealty.com. And our friend Rich Hooper over at 88.3 The Journey. It's Christmas time, of course, and they're playing Christmas music. You like Christmas music?
I do, yeah.
What's
the classic Christmas music?
Well,
I like jazz.
Well, okay.
I like Frank Sinatra and Michael Bublé. And
all right, I could get it. I could dig it. Frank, Dean, Tony Bennett, Judy Garland's, wishing you a merry little Christmas or whatever.
Exactly. Not the pop Christmas music. but the new stuff coming out.
They make a big deal of that Mariah Carey song. I don't know if I ever heard it.
I'm kind of jealous of you. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, you've heard it enough, have you?
I've heard it way too many times.
I don't know if I've heard it. I don't recognize it. But anyway, no. If I want to listen to Christmas music, I don't want the Ray Conniff singers doing, "Come All Ye Faithful." I'd rather have Bing Crosby sing that, or Little Drummer Boy. With the, you ever heard the Bing Crosby David Bowie version of it?
I don't think I have.
Yeah, no. I remember as a kid, he was like 12. David Bowie went on the Bing Crosby Christmas special. And our friend, I can't read it from here. Is it Taylor? Yeah, it's Taylor. Yeah, Frank Sinatra, of course. As far as I was like 12, and David Bowie made an appearance on Bing Crosby's Christmas show, and they sang "Little Drummer Boy" together.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure it's on YouTube.
I'm sure. I'll check it out after the show.
Yeah, so there you go. But anyway, back to Rich. Listen to a station. Give to a station. It's a nonprofit. There, how's that? Okay.
Love it.
All right. I think we're done with the nonprofits. I know that they had that charity ball with the Center for ASD on Saturday night, and I saw Jack Matson today with the Toys for Tots program. They raised 4,500 toys. They gathered 4,500 toys, and their Toys for Tot campaign. That's a record by far, and so it's a bunch, and so a lot of kids around this area, thanks to y'all, are going to have a good Christmas. They may not have it otherwise.
Don't look at that.
No. Taylor lying? Josh was telling me the other day he loves the Mariah Carey song. Is that right?
That is completely false. Taylor, I will get you.
That's called false news.
Exactly.
Yeah, fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news. All right. Well, let's talk about what ain't fake news, unfortunately. That is the situation in education today, and it's pretty dire. Now, I'm not going to get into the old boy syndrome or the back in the good old days syndrome where back in the day, and we were, doing our gazintas. You know what a gazinta is? You know what a gazinta is?
Not off the top of my head.
No. 2 goes into 6 3 times. 2 goes into 8 4 times.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, the Jethro Bodine School of Mathematics. But no, the point is, back when I graduated high school in 1980, we had I would bet half of the curriculum that is offered now. And I don't mean because of all the specialty classes. I just mean we're talking about so much more is expected of high school students than were back in 1980. All right? Because back then you get a high school diploma. There's still plenty of jobs out there that did not require college educations, and you can go make a fine living. Today it's a lot harder. Now, I'm going to talk about, does college guarantee you a job? Obviously not. But the point is that the issues that we face in, say, 1980, we face now, but I think we're much more willing to deal with those issues than we are now. A lot of these issues we have now are, I don't want to say unsolvable, but they're made much more difficult because of political agendas and agendas of other interest groups, including like teachers unions or DEI groups or others. Plus, the fact is our schools are expected to teach a much broader spectrum of kids than they used to be. I mean, back in our day, if you didn't keep up, they put you in remedial courses. They don't do that now. If you had special learning needs, they didn't really accommodate that. All right? I mean, it wasn't that heartless, but they didn't have all these various 504 or other type of designations. And in fact, I was reading an article. I don't know if I'll get to it. I doubt I will, but I was reading an article about how abused the accommodation system is, particularly in college now. And I, as a DBU professor, I have a class of 20. I'll have about 3. See, there you go. I'm going to be hacking. About 3 or 4 that'll have certain type of accommodations. But now we're talking about in some universities, the majority of their incoming classes have some sort of accommodation. And it's not all because of genuine need, but because they know how to manipulate the system. And that way they get extra time on homework and they get extra time on tests and things like that. There you go. You're just going to have to suffer along with me here. But that's not really going to be the focus of what I'm talking about. I'm just going to talk about particularly the situation in Fort Worth and now Lake Worth. Both those school districts have been taken over. Now, what does that mean when they're taken over by the state? I'll get to in some detail. also what caused that and things like that. But I just think in all overall, we need to look at what's going on and what are some of the reasons why they're going on, and what we could do as best we can to try to mitigate that. So anyway, UC San Diego, like I said, is a very fine academic institution. And they, to their credit, had a very hard look at why are their students struggling so much? Why are their students having such difficulty in college, particularly when they are a bit more selective than your typical public school? And also that, they look at the GPAs and whatnot, and they think these kids should be fine, and they're just absolutely getting wiped out. And so they test these kids, and they find out most of them really can't even do math at a basic level. This chart here was one that they did. This is from last year. The last year they have stats for it. And you look at this thing, and I know if you're listening to it or you're driving around or whatever, you don't see it. But basically, only 19% of the incoming class at UC San Diego could do math at an 8th grade level. That's algebra 2 at best. Okay, we're talking about some of these kids that supposedly have very high GPAs. They only 19% of them could do math at the 8th grade level. They had 13% that couldn't do math at all. 13% couldn't do it at the 1st grade level, yet they're been admitted to a university based on their transcripts. And so what they do is they put them in remedial classes. And so we were talking about the need for major universities now to have remedial classes just to take care of this. And they found out that the 94% of those students that have been put in remedial classes had a 3.5 average or better in math classes in high school. And that 94% of them, similar number, had at least up to the calculus level on their transcript, if not past that. So how is it they're getting A's in calculus in high school and they're not even forming at an 8th grade level, according to the tests that San Diego gives them? And so that's one thing we'll look at as grade inflation, certainly, but it just, that's astounding to me. And I was reading about this and others is that this is not just something with them. This is something with major universities all over the country. And I teach at DBU, and I've taught at Hill College quite a bit. All right. And I don't know what my math scores of my students would be. Generally speaking, my students do pretty well. Not always, but generally speaking. But I still found that number amazing. I was reading about this particular thing. This article here is by Ben Sasse. If you don't know who that is, he used to be a senator for Nebraska, and then he went to become the president of the University of Florida, and he left basically because of what DeSantis is trying to do to the universities in Florida. He says, he writes here, the U.S. UCSD revelation likely means that the U.S. has millions of recent high school graduates and 20-somethings who are unprepared to navigate modern work and life and lack the logical problem-solving skills in which algebra has traditionally armed its adolescents. Now, that's the truth. I mean, the reason why there's so much emphasis on algebra as opposed to calculus maybe as a determinant of how you do in math and whatnot is because it's not just numbers and letters and all this other stuff. It's also logic. It's problem-solving skills. And so if you could do algebra, you could apply that to other aspects of your education. Calculus is a little bit more specific, but algebra has probably more universal applications. And if you have right now only 19% of your students at that particular school that could do it at that level, it also bodes very poorly for what's going to happen in other aspects and other abilities to read and analyze and make presumptions and interpretations and things of that nature. And he goes on, he says, but it gets worse. The students admitted to UCSD were on average receiving A grades in high school math classes that supposedly built multiple years beyond algebraic and arithmetic. Say it right, good heavens. Talk about education, can't even read. Anyway, beyond algebraic and arithmetic foundations. Okay? It basically calls that American people being defrauded when their kids are being told, or the parents are being told their kids are making these kind of grades and they don't have any kind of understanding in it at all. Okay? And it goes on even further. Here's one thing. Only 39% could correctly round the number of 374,518 to the nearest hundredth, which is something they teach in the third grade. And so 61% couldn't round to the nearest hundredth. And they're supposed to be going into college. And so that's what it's causing so much trouble for it. We have other slides as well. So let's look at some of the other heartbreaking data. This one, if you're listening to it as opposed to watching, you're not going to see it that easily. But this is the number of people that are proficient in math at the 12th grade level. Okay, and let's be very clear. Okay, about two things. One is we've always struggled with these scores nationwide. All right, this isn't something that's new, but it's something that's becoming more and more serious. Second, here's another little hidden secret. It isn't splitting the atom to get proficient in these tests. And these are the NAEP is the National Association. Try it again. National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's a national test that we do every year, and only 22% are at or above proficiency in math. 22%. Okay, we're talking about close to 1 in 5 kids are proficient, and so 78% are not. And so you look at the numbers, and it's not good. It hasn't always been good. But the consequences, as we go in more and more in this technological society, and there's fewer and fewer jobs that basically just depend upon skill or brawn, 22% is shocking. What else you got? Well, let's look at the next score, which is the 12th grade in reading achievement. There, it's only 35%, and that's been rapidly declining over the years. Math is kind of slowly declining. Reading and English reading proficiency, not so much English language, but reading proficiency has been dropping for years, and it's now at 35%. So basically, only about 1 in 3 of our 12th graders read at the level they should be. By the way, it reminds me, Josh, have you seen those signs on the highway about Fort Worth schools? There's one on 35, okay, and there's another one on Airport Freeway. And I saw it, and it surprised me because they said, if you're not reading by the 3rd grade, you won't graduate high school. And it's a comment on the Fort Worth system. And that's not an exaggeration. If you can't read at level by 3rd grade, the odds of you graduating high school are like 10%. And it's the odds of you ever catching up and becoming proficient are negligible. If you're behind by the 3rd grade, you're probably almost always going to be behind all your life. Okay? And that's why they push reading so strongly in the early grades. And they test it so strongly in the 3rd grade. And right now, Fort Worth is like 30-something%. I got the numbers around there somewhere. I'll be digging through all this paper. But the point is that these signs I thought were extraordinarily frank, and they were true. If you see them on 35 and Airport Freeway, there's probably others. I bet there's others on 30 I just haven't seen. But the point is that if you're not reading on level by 3rd grade, the chances are you'll never will the rest of your life. And I found that to be shocking when I was doing the research on this. So this is a lot more serious than the fact that they can't read a book, which reading a book, it makes me sound like I came in on my horse and wagon. Book reading is a lost art. One time I mentioned newspapers to my class, and they looked at me like, what is this newspaper you speak of? Is it really made of paper? And all this other stuff. Kids. One time we were talking about music, and I told my students, yeah, I'll bring my 45s in tomorrow. And they looked at me like, why are you bringing guns to school? You know what a 45 is, Josh? They really said that. You don't know
They said that?
Yeah, you know what a 45 is, right? What is it?
In music.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? It's a cassette.
Oh, no.
No?
It's a single. It's a small record.
Oh, that's what it is. Yep.
See, thank you for proving my point.
I was thinking of 8-track for the record. That's on me.
I thought 8-track was pretty cool back in the day. I thought, wow, we're really progressing. All right. Anyway, listen to you. Let's see. Let's go back. Go to the younger grades here. All right. Here's in the fourth grade. Fourth grade here at the mathematics level is 39%. So actually, you'd better do it better in the fourth grade than we are in the 12th grade. So we're sliding away. Also, at the reading level in the fourth grade, I believe is the next slide. Is it? No, it's the AP scores. Wait, which is it, buddy? You making me dizzy over here.
AP scores?
No, which the one was it? I thought we had a reading one, but that's... no, I guess not. It didn't matter. We talk about the AP scores. I'm going to get to that in a couple of minutes. The point about all of this is that we're in very bad shape, and in such bad shape that 2 of our neighborhood districts are now been taken over by the TEA. That's pretty serious. Does that mean they're going to be dissolved? I doubt it. In Fort Worth's case, I'm not going to place any money on Lake Worth's case, but they have dissolved school districts before when they've taken them over. There's a couple out west that, one was in like North Houston. There's one out west that was a really small district, and they just merged it with the local one. And that's what happens when they dissolve districts. So let's merge it into local ones. But they had one in North Houston a few years ago. They had one down near Beaumont, the Lamarck district was dissolved. And they've had one here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Wilmer Hutchins, over in Ellis County. It's Wilmer Hutchins is just north of Ferris and south of Lancaster. And they dissolved that district, and the students are all split up between DeSoto, Dallas, and Lancaster ISDs. So, yeah, that's on the table for Fort Worth. I don't think it'll happen, but it's possible they could actually dissolve it. Now, what's caused this? Okay. I think there's a lot of reasons, and a lot of people want to blame COVID, and COVID is on the list. Okay, COVID is a factor. But but the declining trends have been declining since prior to COVID. Okay, this isn't something that we were doing great and we're cranking along and boom, here comes COVID and it throw us all out of whack. That's not what happened. We've been declining for a while now, and COVID made it worse. And that is part of it. A lot of it, reason why a lot of these universities are having so much trouble is a lot of them don't take the SAT or ACT scores anymore. Why? Because their admissions group says it's racist. All right, that it's racially biased and it hurts non-white test takers. Well, what has happened is that there really isn't any objective standard to see if this particular student, where he or she stands in the relationship to try to enter to a university. Because if you go strictly by GPA, grade inflation has made that a fairly useless determinant. Okay, grade inflation, and it's a real thing, and there's a lot of reasons for that too. Grade inflation is rampant at the post school level and at the university level. There was an article in the New York Times last month about the Harvard professors basically don't give anything but A's. Our Harvard's supposed to be the elite of the elite of the elite, and they basically, it's all A's. And part of the reason why is that they don't give A's, they have to go through all this hassle and prove that they were not biased against who did not receive that A. And so what happened was, beginning this coming semester, Harvard's university's faculty and its administration said, we are going to crack down on grade inflation. And what was really funny reading the article is about there was a lot of kids that needed a safe space after reading that, and they were very upset, and they felt like that was unfair. And they felt like they were being picked on and all this and all this other business. And so you have a situation where, Harvard is experiences, and this happens in high school too. Grade inflation is a terrible problem in high school. Why? The pressures on passing students is not on the students. It's on the teachers. Absolutely. I had this conversation more than once. An administrator say, so-and-so is failing your class. And I go, I'm aware of that. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to assign him work. And if he doesn't do it, I'll give him a 0. Well, we need him to pass. I never, let me be clear. I never had an administrator come to me and demand a student pass. I never had a coach come and say, "Can you give my ball player a break?" But I had plenty of conversations over the 30-something years of public and private education too. If I had a failing student, what was my plan of action? Okay. And my plan of action was, I'm going to hold them accountable. And I've had other colleagues over the years have had those conversations where your failure rate's too high. What are you going to do about it? And Josh, what do you think is the number one reason why a student fails a class? What would you think? Is it because the material's too hard?
I would say it has something to do with their home life.
Well, yes, but I'm not saying when it comes to the numbers, you're right. I'm going to get to that as well. The number one reason, without anybody being close, is that they don't do the work, or they don't show up. Absenteeism, but mostly they just don't do it, and so you have nothing to grade. So it isn't like, okay, you turn something in, I'm going to give it a 65 because I'm in that mood. It's usually because they have nothing to turn in, and I can't tell you how many times I've had teachers tell me that so-and-so and so-and-so is trying to get, do a semester's worth of work in the last week so they could pass. Or that the administration said, we need you to, accommodate some of this and give extra credit and all this sort of stuff. I never gave extra credit because if I figured, the kids that would do it don't need it. The kids that need it won't do it. And so I never messed around with extra credit. And also, I felt like if they're not going to do the regular credit, why am I bailing their butts out of the fire? It's as simple as that. Now, fortunately for me, I was not in a typical situation. I'm not going to say my situation at Burles High School was normal because I had mostly seniors and juniors. And by that time, they kind of pretty much have figured out it's time to get out of this place and I need to do this to do that. Plus, I taught a lot of advanced placement and dual enrollment classes. So I had, usually speaking, better students. And so I didn't have the issues like of a freshman English class, which is like my idea of hell, try to teach freshman English. But grade inflation is a serious problem. And then there's other reasons as well. And again, I want to make this point clear. I can't recall a single time an athlete or some other extracurricular-based student I had to give them certain considerations. I never had a coach, never had the choir teacher, never had the band director come and say, please, can you help me pass this kid because I need him? And I never had a grade changed on me by the administration, which, by the way, is against the law. A teacher or administrator can lose their license or change in grades. The law is very clear that the teacher is the giver of the grade, and that's it. So I don't want to, get into those kind of narratives. The point is, though, the pressure to pass kids is not on the kid. And it is a trickle-down effect, definitely, if you will allow me to use that phrase, you liberal types. The state of Texas puts a great deal of pressure upon schools to graduate students. And therefore, it goes to the superintendent and school board to graduate students. Therefore, it goes to the campus administrators from the superintendent. Therefore, it goes to the classroom from the classroom administrators to the school administrators. So it does fall down eventually upon the teacher. And they're looking at a situation where I have a 68 with this kid. He was a pain in the rump the whole time, but do I want to deal with the pain in the rump if I'm failing? Boom, it's a 70. And those kind of late night decisions are made all the time. Same thing, but the point is that the student is the last one that we put the responsibility of passing upon. It goes from the state to the district to the campus to the classroom, period. Because the consequences of that kid not graduating is terrible for him on the long term, but it's really difficult for us in the near term as a district. And therefore, being in that situation, we need to get this guy across the stage. And I remember one anecdote still sticks in my craw a little bit. I had a student that was failing my class. It was a government class. And he was failing 2 others as well. And about 8 or 9 days before the last day of class, they called in him and about 20 other like students. And the administration gave them a piece of their mind. And I saw them as they were coming out of the lecture room. And I said, have you got the message? You going to graduate? Oh, I'll graduate. He says, so what are you going to do? Do your work now? No, not really. I'll graduate. And sure enough, he crosses that stage. And I really wasn't even upset by it by this point in my career. It's like, I know how this works. Basically, to fail high school, short of committing a felony, and I guess short of committing a serious felony anyway, you're going to graduate. And it doesn't really matter what your academic achievements been. And again, I don't want people to hear this and say, well, those darn teachers, those darn administrators, because I can tell you right now, the first person we're going to hear from when their kid isn't graduating is going to be that parent. The parents are going to be the ones that are going to be raising the hell about it as well. And so it isn't like it isn't like for most of these parents, they're going to say, well, I guess he deserves it. He didn't do his work. He didn't show up. I get it. No, they're going to come to us either threatening or pleading or a little of both and say, what are you going to do to get my kid that piece of paper so he can cross that stage? And that's been my real problem with some of this is that the system is set up not that so they won't fail, but they can't fail. It's impossible almost to fail unless you get kicked out of school. Or if you just flat out say, I will not return to school, I am dropping out, and all this other stuff. And even then, it's a different thing. There's other issues as well about it. I don't want to say that all the teachers I've ever worked with are hardworking and dedicated, but most of them were by far. But yeah, I worked with a handful over my years. I had no business being in the classroom. And that, unfortunately, tends to be what people think about when they think about teachers sometimes. It's not how well they did under this teacher. It's how this outlier stunk so bad. All right? And everybody I've talked to over the years had a story about teacher X or Coach Y or whatever that basically punted their class. And that's another thing I want to diverge on in a minute. This idea that coaches can't teach is rubbish. I saw some excellent coaches in the classroom. I mean, some very good ones. And I saw some real hacks that weren't coaches, that were teachers. So it isn't like if just because they're a coach, they're going to be an average teacher. I saw some excellent coaches that did the job in the classroom. Particularly since in the last 25 years of No Child Left Behind made it much more imperative that they have training in their subject. But anyway, that's another thing. But the thing about it is, what makes this so difficult, I'm not just focused on BSD, but nationwide. Another thing that makes it very difficult, though, isn't so much the individual teachers, but teachers' unions, which I think are one of the biggest impediments to educational improvement in the system. Teacher unions, particularly in the Midwest and California and the Northeast, are counterproductive to the education of your children, period. All right? I understand having representation. Like I belong to a teachers' professional union, not union, we don't have unions in Texas, professional association. It was a Association of Texas Professional Educators. And what they did for me is they were, a lobbying group down in Austin, and I could get some insurance through them and things of that nature. We don't have collective bargaining here, which is a good thing. But you look at teachers' unions, and they are tremendous impediments, particularly in trying to rid the classroom of hacks in the classroom. Josh, here's a Trivial Pursuit question. Last year, how many teachers in the state of California were fired for cause for not teaching? I don't mean because they committed a crime or something like that. They just didn't do the job. How many of them were fired?
In the state of California?
Entire state of California. Take a guess.
20.
2.
2. All right.
Yeah, 2. In the entire state were fired for cause. For firing up for not doing the job after a great deal of hassle. And so teacher unions, they're not there for the students at all. Teacher unions are a tremendous impediment. You look what's going on in Chicago. My gosh, Chicago is one of the worst districts in the country, yet their teachers, on the average, are making the low six figures, and they're demanding more. They're the mayor, who has got to be the worst mayor I've ever seen, and that says something after you read about Bill de Blasio in New York. This guy, Brendan Johnston, and in Chicago who was a union organizer and negotiator, who's now their mayor. Basically, they're trying to get a contract through there within 3 years. There's going to be about a 30% raise. And like I said, they're already making on the average $110,000. And it's one of the worst districts there is. Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, is the worst district in our system. And Cleveland and Milwaukee and Los Angeles, just terrible. And they're all dominated by unions. Now, I have some friends that are more pro-union than I, and this is why I said during my promo for the show, I'd be stepping on toes. I respect and love my colleagues, but this is one area our paths diverged, because I just think unions have prevented these needed impacts that we need to make things work. Also, the fact is that this idea of teaching to the test, absolutely do. Anybody who tells you otherwise are lying. But we always, most people say, oh, sure, we teach the test. Because why? Because the failure of that test, which, by the way, is not a particularly difficult hurdle to clear, but the failure of that test really impacts the schools. And if your school isn't doing well, people's heads will roll. And that's just the way it is. They'll change administrators. They'll probably reassign staff. If you're a teacher on a campus that's in a failing situation, they could reassign you to something else. And so the point about all of that is that test and its requirements put so much pressure on students and everybody else. And we're coming up with the scores we're doing because it's just not, we're not able to teach material. We're just grinding through process, particularly in the English classes. They're not reading Shakespeare. They're reading maybe an excerpt at best, but they're also learning how to write for the test and things of that nature. Now, what impact has this had in our system? Well, we've had an explosion of the three major alternatives: charters, private school, homeschooling. Okay. Now there's a few things I would like to, address each one. First of all, what a charter school is, it's a publicly funded school, but they're able to specialize. They can actually be affiliated with a church. They could do certain things that are exempt from the requirements of the state and whatever else. Where does this charter come from? Usually from a group of citizens, or maybe from for-profit institutions. The idea that these charter schools are better than public schools is rubbish. Okay, there's good ones and there's bad ones. A lot of these charter schools are built with something other than the education of students in mind. A notorious example, one is the state had just closed down this year. It's called Faith and Family over in Oak Cliff in Dallas. They had a nationally ranked basketball team, and they kept failing on the academic side. Another example would be Deion Sanders' charade, Prime Prep Academy, nationally ranked football and basketball, but they were basically just doing online classes at best, and still they were academically unacceptable. All right, and you do get some charters that really are pretty good, but you also get a lot of charters that are based on there's state money available and money to be made from it. So that's why when it comes to the charters, I'm not opposed to them as such, but or the concept, but I think you have to understand what they're there for. And if they are, let's say it's a charter school that specializes in people with learning disabilities and whatever else, that's great. If it's a school that specializes in low-income young men, from low-income families, that's great. But they still need to be learning the kids, right? Teaching them well, regardless of what motive or whatever the concept they built around. As far as private schools, there's this perception that they're by definition going to be better than public schools. I wouldn't say that's true in every case, but I will say that private schools have three things that the public schools don't have: selectivity, if they want to be that way. They don't have to take them all. Second of all, they have smaller classes. Third of all, they do usually have a parental structure that pushes the kids to do better. Okay. a fourth one can be money, but when I was teaching at Southwest Christian, there were some students there that came from pretty middle income families. They were there basically because grandma was helping pay for it, or they had gotten some scholarship money. And we're not always talking just about athletes. We're talking about academic scholarships and whatnot. But the point is that the smaller classes and the expectations placed upon the student by both the campus faculty and the home life made it success much more likely. Now, not all private schools are that good. We've had a couple here in Burleson that washed out about 25 years ago that really didn't do the job. Okay? That's as frank as I can put it. They didn't do it. And there's schools in Fort Worth where that's happening. But most of the private schools tend to do better, not just because they're smarter kids, but because they're in smaller classrooms and they have expectations of performance and discipline. And if the discipline gets out of hand, some kid just don't go play ball. See you later, kid, and they can move them on. Now, other issues existed in the private schools that did in the public schools, as administrators and parents and blah, blah, blah. But there you go. And as far as homeschooling, this has always been interesting to me because back in the 90s, the only people I knew that were homeschooling were the kids that got kicked out of school or had health issues. All right? Now there's so many different programs. And almost 9 times out of 10, when I talk to somebody who comes from a homeschool environment, it's always because of the faith-based element of it. Would you say that's true, Josh? Usually?
I'd say about that. I think it does kind of depend on the element. But
I do know, like one family, that because their kids have health issues, they homeschool, and they do really well at it. So, that's not a problem. But and they're a faith-based home, so they get that there. But I do know a lot of these programs are faith-based, right? And it's funny when I talk to some of my former students and I ask, "Hey, where's your kid go to school?" And they go, "Well," they kind of hold their head down and go, "Well, we're homeschooling." And the reason why they're holding their head down is not because they think they're going to hurt my feelings. I'm going to go, give them a hard time or whatever. And I don't at all. I understand. I understand. And as far as private schooling, I put my kids through Holy Cross when they're elementary grades. And to be real frank, I probably kept them in, particularly my son, in a little too long. But it was what we wanted. We wanted our kids to grow up in a faith-based environment educationally for at least the first 3 or 4 years. All right? So I get it. But what's happening is schools are losing students all the time because of these things. All right? It's like it's a slow leak. And then you couple the fact that beginning next year, the Texas voucher system goes online, and they'll be able to take homeschooling up to $1,000 per kid, and private school up to $10,000 per kid, and vouchers. You're going to see an accelerated exit from a lot of the public schools, which is really a shame. All right, I am a fan of the public schools. I talk to the Joshua people a lot more than I used to, and I talk to the Burleson people. And, we offer so much more than we used to. Not just calculus and, advanced biology and all these other classes that we didn't have when I was in school, blah, blah, blah. But all these various other technical related. We have the game theory school, and we got STEM school, and we have early collegiate school over on, it used to be the old high school, used to be the old middle school. I mean, we offer a ton of stuff, but what's happening is that, how can I frankly put it? We have too many families that are sending their kids to school unready, unwilling, and unable to learn. And I think that's the elephant in the room when we talk about education. This is where the toe stepping comes in. I know a lot of families really work hard at trying to get their kids through school. But I know too many of them that basically think they did their job, just they got the kid up in the morning, maybe. And they really are not that focused on how their kids are doing in school. You mentioned this earlier, Josh. What do you think is the number one factor in how well a kid does in school? It's home life, right? Well, we can't fix everybody's home life. All right. There's a lot of hard family stories there. But the schools are often having to deal with that. But the number one factor in whether a kid does decently in school or not is expectations. I'm no genius, but I had expectations when I was growing up. My parents weren't like grade dictators, so to speak. They weren't real tyrannical about all that, but they kept up. And if I come home with a mediocre grade in a class, well, there's going to be some conversation and there's going to be a plan. And if that plan included me not running around playing hoop with my buddies in the afternoon, playing some basketball, then that's the plan. All right. And so I knew that if I came home with bad grades, there's going to be a conversation I would not enjoy. And again, I don't want to give the impression my dad, my mom are like really just strict about it, but they had expectations. And so there you go. Same with my sister. And so I went to Baylor and I was fairly well prepared. Not because Plano High School was so great, which was a good school. Absolutely was. But I was prepared because I had those expectations. And that's what I would tell any parent whose kid's struggling in school. How involved are you in their education? Okay? So first thing is, be involved in your kid's education. Know the teachers' names. Know who your teachers are for your kids. These are your children. You should know what adult is going to be spending quality time with your kid. Second of all, trust the teachers. Again, I'm not going to tell you every teacher is perfect, but trust the teachers. When a kid's not doing well in the class and they're starting to blame the teacher, don't just take that for granted to be the true story. Find out. And it might be the teacher, but it probably isn't. But find out. So, trust your teachers. Also, keep track of the progress. What was it? One of the more interesting days of the year was Meet the Teacher Night, parent-teacher night. And I had a fairly decent turnout because, again, I had AP level students and things of that nature. And I'm telling you right now, the difference between an AP kid and a non-AP kid is negligible at best. I mean, I had some really, really bright kids in AP, and I had some really, really bright kids in my non-AP classes. I had some knuckleheads in AP and some knuckleheads in non-AP. So the fact that they were an AP student, the number one distinguishing factor wasn't the native talent, it was the structure around them. They had somebody in their life that was holding them accountable, even if they were being raised by a single mom. Okay? That is the number one factor. And I tell you that, and I'll say this right now before I forget to say, the number one factor why I was considered to be a pretty successful teacher, it wasn't because I was smarter than my colleagues. It wasn't because I was better read. Because I knew some pretty bright people there I was working with. The number one reason why I was able to do what I did in school is because I had students willing to let me teach them. That was it. Oh, you like that, do you?
That was good, yeah.
I had students that let me teach them. All right. And I had some students that were kind of difficult, and who doesn't, But again, by the time I got them, they were juniors at least, or seniors. And so some of the sass had been kind of rubbed off on them a little bit, and the knuckleheads had kind of weeded themselves out and that kind of thing. And they could see the end goal coming, so they were, just make this happen. But I had students that let me teach. And again, you look at my students, and they didn't all come from a two-parent original set of parents who lived in a nice house, never had to worry about money. I had students from every walk, some in pretty desperate shape, and some, being split between families or living with a stepdad and mom and a stepdad that they couldn't stand. And you name it. But again, the number one factor is expectations. And that really made the difference. Now, as far as the school itself, the students, rather I put it this way, the schools will only be as rigorous as the parents and the community allows. One of the things to talk about the Fort Worth system, they're being taken over, and I haven't really addressed that much, so I'm going to address it real quickly. You ain't got anywhere to go, do you?
No, sir.
Okay. We'll talk about the Fort Worth and about how they're being, taken over. Basically, what that means is the administration has been, basically the authority's been superseded by the state, and they're going to be picking a new superintendent. which may be the current one because they like her. Her name is Karen Molinar. Talk about Fort Worth now. But the school board has been dissolved, and they're going to be taken over by a board of civilians, basically. And I don't know how they're going to pick them, but I do know one requirement is that they live in the district. So I'm out anyway. But basically, that they're right now, because what caused Fort Worth to be taken over was that I'm reading here from the Dallas Morning News. Across all grades and subjects, only 34% of students in Fort Worth ISD are at meeting grade level. I'll read that again because I lost my train. Only 34% of students in Fort Worth ISD are meeting grade level. This is 16% points the state average. Okay? Now, what caused this takeover is multiple schools in the Fort Worth system where got D or F ratings. And if you get a school that has 5 consecutive years of F ratings, the takeover is automatic. And you think, well, whoa, gee, one school out of the whole system did badly. Why are they taking over Fort Worth? Majority of schools are D and F. But they did have one school that had 5 consecutive years when they dissolved the school. What about the teachers? They were reassigned. What about the administrators? We'll see what happens to them. Lake Worth is even in worse shape. Only 22% of Lake Worth kids are on grade average right now. That system is much more in danger of being dissolved. Are there other districts that are being taken over? Yeah. There's 4 others. The closest one is Marlin, down north of Waco. Okay. But they got another one that's in South San Antonio School District. And, I'm just doing it off the top of my head because I'm flipping through all these papers. But there's 2 others, and they're mostly out in West Texas. But Lake Worth has a dramatic hill to overcome, and they could be dissolved. Fort Worth, I doubt will be. Now, but my point is this. I'm going to go back to my original point because I strayed from it. My original point was the schools can only be as rigorous as the community and the parents allow it to be. Because when Houston was taken over and they put a new board in, new superintendent in, they did see some improvement. Fewer poorly graded campuses. But that met with a lot of pushback from parents and parent groups that they were being too rigorous or too difficult with their kids. Burleson is not in any way near this shape. Neither is Joshua. Neither is any school district probably within normal listening range here. Grandview, Keene, all that. They're fine in terms of this. They're not any dangers of takeovers. But you want more from these schools. You're going to have to both demand it and allow it. And that's where I'm going to sum up this whole thing. My message to the community is this. You want better schools, you can both demand them and you need to allow them. You need to allow the kids to fail sometimes. You need to allow the teachers to actually assign a book in English class, for crying out loud. You need to actually have a system where if the kid does not do well, then it's on the kid to pick up the game, not the teacher. If he fails the test, don't give him a retest over and over again, like happens in so many districts. If he doesn't do the work, then have him face the consequence of not doing that work. If he's not going to class, have him face the consequence of not going to class. That's, shielding our kids from consequences from non-performance or poor performance is making them fail even further and fall even further to the pit. And so, Burleson, Joshua, fill in the blank, you want better schools? Really waiting for the state of Texas to make it happen is a waste of time. Waiting for the administration and teachers to do it, they're already doing it. Okay? They're already doing it. And don't sit around the coffee shop and bellyache about, teachers when you don't even know who's teaching your kid his 9th grade English. Don't bellyache about the superintendent when you don't even know what he's doing, which is a lot. Okay, I know there's some criticism about Dr. Jimerson, and and it's part of the job. I get it, but I know him well enough to know that the quality of education is foremost on his mind. I'll put it that way. Same with our school board members. I do know them well, and that's always been number one priority. But again, I'm talking to the parents. If you're doing all these things and it's not working, keep doing them. Okay? If you say, I do all these things already, you go, coot, great, keep doing them. Don't give it up. If you're not doing them and your kid isn't doing well, then ask yourself, what are you doing to make it happen? Not what somebody else is doing. Not what the teachers are doing, whatever. What are you doing? And if you're doing everything you can, then you have a legitimate ground to go and say, I want better from X, Y, and Z, from the staff, administration, et cetera. But pay attention to what your kid is doing in school. Monitor how much time he spends on Xbox or how much time she spends on social media. Make consequences real if they're not doing well. If they're not doing what they should be doing, then take away what they are doing until they should be doing better. Remember what the focus of school is. It's not sports, it's not singing and dancing, it's not playing an instrument. Those are great and wonderful things. But if you're not getting a decent education, all that just a playtime. So that's my sermon for the day, and that's what I really been wanting to say to parents for a long time. I could count on one hand in all the years that I ever had to deal with a difficult parent. The parents of Bertelsen were always really good to me. But I also attributed that not because I was such a swell guy and so friendly and easy to get along with, is because that's the kind of parents they are. And they were that way with all the teachers. They did their job. And that's what I would leave y'all with. Learn something today, Josh?
Yes, sir.
You want to go back to school now, don't you?
Not in the slightest, but I'm sure someone out there does.
I used to, I taught at Hill for all those years. And I used to really respect and admire, particularly the night student classes, when they were like 30-year-old single mom or a 45-year-old guy that worked at Lockheed, or maybe just a mom whose kids are now out of school and she wanted to learn for herself. I respected the heck out of that because I thought, now that's what we're talking about, is not giving up the dream. All right. And as far as the number of great students I had at Hill, this Bertelsen Opportunity Fund, which I didn't only mention, is a godsend to this community because there were a lot of kids that would have not gone or been able to go otherwise. It's on the screen too. See, he's always ahead of the game. I know we'll be having them on probably in January. But I'm just saying that, this city does good things for its students. And that's why we're not in danger of being taken over. But that's my Christmas exhortation to the community. Make sure you've done everything you can do to make your kid ready, able, and willing to be taught. And if it's still not happening, then you can have a different conversation. Anyway, tomorrow I'm going to have Megan and Summer from Next Step. We're going to have like a year-end meeting, talk about what they got going on in the next year. They do such great things. Also, they are going to take a couple weeks off, which, they are volunteers. And a lot of people think they should be open 24/7 or whatever. No, sorry. They are volunteers and they do have Christmas plans and families, etc. So we'll talk tomorrow about that. Next week, we're going to have a show just on Monday. And I'm really not sure exactly what it's going to be. I might year-end retrospective, whatever. And then the next Monday, maybe my doom and gloom forecast for 2026. But we're only going to have one show each week next week. So we could celebrate the Christmas season. Josh, does it bother you when people say happy holidays? I like Merry Christmas.
I also like Merry Christmas.
I do too.
It doesn't bother me when people say happy holidays.
You go to the store and they say happy holidays. They're probably just trying to be nice because they don't know I might be Jewish for all they know.
Yeah, it's inclusive, but you can tell when someone's like aggressive about it.
Yeah, so he says happy holidays to me. I go, oh, thank you, you too. But I prefer Merry Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there you go. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow.